The heady experience of Reykjavik comes to a sudden halt. News has surfaced that the United States has traded arms to Iran in exchange for hostages. Overnight, Reagan's approval ratings plunge from 67% to 46%.
The Iran-Contra affair occurred in the 1970s under the Reagan administration. The U.S. believed that changes in Iran and Nicaragua in the 1970s were a threat to U.S. national interests. After funding was cut to the Democratic Contras by Congress, Reagan's administration secretly continued to support them in Nicaragua, attempting to overthrow the communist Sandinistas. The U.S. also sold arms to Iran in exchange for the American hostages that were held by Iranian allies in Lebanon. The profits from these sales were then used to fund the Contras so that there would be no money trail.
Remember that time the United States sold weapons to the Iranian government in a weapons exchange for hostages deal in spite of an embargo against selling arms to Iran?
It was against our policy, and as it drifted into getting hostages back, I opposed it even more vigorously, because if you pay for getting hostages back, all you're doing is inviting people to take more hostages.
At first, the weapon sales to Iran were strictly economic, but then it became apparent that hostages could be released for additional sales. All of this had to be done secretly since the United States had an embargo on all weapons sales to Iran because of the Iran-Iraq War. The U.S. chose to support Iraq after Iran had their revolution. Shultz was the Secretary of State at the time and knew that these secret sales to Iran were going on. He had previously experienced a similar situation with the Watergate scandal and predicted it would tear Reagan's administration and approval ratings apart.
Will there be any more arms shipments to Iran?
Under the circumstances of Iran's war with Iraq, its pursuit of terrorism, its association with those holding our hostages, I would certainly say, as far as I'm concerned, no.
Do you have the authority to speak for the entire administration?
No.
That was the end of the interview. And the next day I went off to make a talk somewhere in Chicago, I think, or someplace. Anyway, when I left, I said, when I come back, I will no longer be Secretary of State.
The events that led to the words Iran and Contra even being used in the same sentence are the result of a complicated set of super-secret operations that would alter the public's perception of President Reagan dramatically.
The Reagan administration knew that their activities were going against Congress and the nation's ideals and would be frowned upon. Because of this, they would have to cover their money trail, from weapon sales to Iran. This would be accomplished by selling arms to the Contra rebels with the profits.
For the past several years, the Reagan administration has been involved in an expensive, sophisticated, highly publicized campaign to stamp out drug smuggling. But for some time, there have been startling accusations that the United States government itself may have actually helped bring drugs into this country as part of the effort to supply arms and perhaps money to the Nicaraguan rebels, the Contras. CBS News correspondent Jane.
We could bring back our own cargo, and they would arrange it, or we could bring back their cargo without ever having to worry about interception, arrest, anything like this, that everything was taken care of.
What kind of cargo were you talking about?
Drugs.
What kind of drugs?
Whatever you wanted, marijuana, cocaine.
Whatever you want to come back with, fine, we can make sure you don't get hit by customs.
It was my understanding that they would make sure we wouldn't get caught. They would provide not only the cargo, but the landing areas, crews, everything.
For drug runs?
Yeah.
They would also provide the drugs if you wanted.
Absolutely, which indeed they did.
These drug runs were another way to cover the money trail while also minimizing the obvious involvement of government by flying supplies with regular drug smugglers.
What you saw in the Iran-Contra hearings was the exposure of the beginnings of a national security state which believes it has the right to override the Constitution of the United States in the name of security.
This is one question that every country must face in a time of crisis. Where is the line drawn for government to break laws in order to better their country's position economically, socially, and politically?
I think that there was a substantial shadow government trying to run foreign affairs for the United States.
In any other country, it would have been called a coup. And they seem to have gotten away with it.
I'd hate to think, as many of my colleagues here have already expressed themselves, that in the process, we have shredded our own democratic fabric.
Oliver North was the general authorized to carry out these acts and took the fall for them to the end. He reasoned that he carried out his orders and that higher powers were to blame.
I did do it. I am not, as I said in my statement, at all ashamed of any of the things that I did. I was given a mission, and I tried to carry it out.